Good morning. This is all you need to know. I'm Agam Vakil. Let's start by taking a look at the global markets. And there have been deeper cuts coming in a continuation of the weakness that we've seen in the American markets. But the European indices didn't really show that much weakness. Perhaps they could catch on today. But we are seeing that amount of weakness seep into the Asian markets, and thereby with SGX Nifty indicating a negative opening at this point in time, since the SGX Nifty is showing 11-point cut. Now, we did see severe weakness in the Indian benchmarks last Friday, with the Nifty coming off by as much as 1.8%, and the mid-cap and the small-cap indices weren't too far behind in that weakness. The Nifty banking indices too had come off. A large part of that weakness in the Nifty banking index was on account of some of those private sector banks. The Nifty IT index coming off around 2.3%, the auto index down 2%. And moving on to your ADRs at this point in time are also indicating a negative opening, with Wipro, ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, Infosys all trading in the red, including something like Dr. Reddy's, Vedanta and Tata Motors. Contributors was, or rather your fund flows were, well, again, the gross numbers were very small in terms of buy and sell, and it's been a continuation of trend of what we've seen for FIs and DIs. But in terms of contributors, again, well, it was largely Reliance Industries, ICICI Bank and SBI. But let's move on and talk about your futures and options space. And well, it is expiry week. It's a truncated one, and we've started to see rollovers pick up. I suspect this number will be much higher when it comes to the rollovers from currently, which is standing around 19%. The Nifty banking rollovers at 16% as well. This number is also expected to move much higher in today's day of trade. But let's talk about your other variables. And on expected lines, we saw more writing around the higher level calls and unwinding in the lower level puts. Considering the Nifty came off quite substantially. And in terms of open interest distribution, the only option that actually stands out with respect to accumulation is the 11,000 call, as you can see, and that's followed by the 10,900 call. Save for them, relatively other calls, we haven't seen too much going on. The WIX, of course, rose nearly 12% and moved above the mark of around, well, nearly 16. And this could be possibly a problematic area for those who are long in the markets, with the expectation of volatility. But the Nifty put call ratio came off to around 1.28. Similarly, the Bank Nifty put call ratio also coming off to around 0.86. And in terms of your stocks, we have Reliance Capital, which moves out of the F&O band, so watch out for that. But we also have a lot of traction in something like an Adani Pause. So rollovers at 15% right now, and they're seeing some weakness, so a lot of short addition in this particular stock. We also have CG Power, again, a lot of longs building up, and of course, do remember CG Power is going to be in focus considering, order wins. And finally, we also have Shriram Transport Finance. Again, a lot of weakness coming in here, with a nearly 18% added in open interest as far as its December futures go. So these are the three stocks that we're watching out for. But it could just be a very challenging day for the Indian markets. But what about the globe? Let's go across to Kathleen Hayes for the top international headlines.
The White House has moved to try to calm the markets after the recent steep losses. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin spoke to the 6 largest U.S. banks over the weekend and was told they have ample liquidity for lending to consumers, business, and other operations. Mnuchin also assured financial markets that Jay Powell is safe at the Fed after reports President Trump has discussed firing him. The shutdown in Washington is now expected to drag into the new year, with Republicans and Democrats at odds over President Trump's border wall. Acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney says the administration is awaiting a counteroffer to the president's demand for $5 billion, with no vote expected before the end of the week. Top Democrats say they have no intention of paying up.
$5 billion is a lot of money. That's 650,000 children attending Head Start. It's 2 million meals a day, a year for seniors. And to spend it on a 4th century strategy rather than on stuff that actually improves border security is something we're just not going to do.
Outgoing Defense Secretary Jim Mattis will now leave the job 2 months early, with President Trump promoting his top deputy from January 1st. The abrupt move to cut short his tenure was announced in a tweet and follows criticism about the withdrawal from Syria and a sense of turmoil in the national security team. Patrick Shanahan is a former Boeing executive who joined the administration last year. The number of people now known killed in the Indonesian tsunami has risen to 222, with dozens more unaccounted for. Most of the victims were tourists killed by two giant waves late on Saturday, thought to have been triggered by an eruption of the nearby Anak Krakatau volcano. Disaster comes ahead of the peak holiday season and may hurt the tourism industry and put further pressure on the rupiah. Global News, 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Kathleen Hayes. This is Bloomberg.
Significant valuation discounts now in a number of Asian equity markets, and indeed we've had some relief rallies in some of the Asian FX markets. There are people who believe that you know there's some more strength to come there, but as you pointed out, very few equity markets have had positive returns in 2018, and indeed lots of forecasts going into next year are somewhat bound by the fact that you still have the overarching trade war issue. You still have an earnings growth environment that's very restricted on a number of fronts. In places like Japan, the consensus numbers have been dialed down significantly, and you've got foreign investors fleeing the market at quite a significant clip. And then in places like China and Hong Kong that are very deep into bear markets, you still have the overarching worry of how the tech sector performs. That's one of the notable re-rated sectors this year, the Asian tech space. And of course, in markets like India that have done okay lately, but they have their own problems going into 2019 with the general elections and the most recent local elections showing that Modi is in somewhat of a predicament going into those elections. So plenty of worries in big markets like India as well. So across the board, as we get into this holiday season, it's difficult to really see any chance of a sustainable rebound from here. The only kind of saving grace, I suppose, is that as liquidity does come off, you can get more sizable moves. So there may be a little bit more of a potential for people to take a bit of risk if they're feeling brave at the end of the year.
Oil prices have plunged more than 10%, even after OPEC Plus alliance has decided to trim output by 1.2 million barrels a day in early December. Obviously, the agreement is to prop up prices and to reduce the oversupply, but the market has been having doubts over the effectiveness of the deal. That's because there are fears over surging U.S. shale production, as well as concerns over weakening global economic growth. Despite Saudi oil minister's comments on how the producer group will most likely extend the agreement in April, his assurance didn't do much to stop the decline in oil prices. Because the planned cuts haven't done much to stabilize the market, some members of the OPEC have already said that they will extend or even deepen their 6-month accord to curb production. Officials from Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE agreed to, with Saudi Arabia, expectation that the group will extend
expansion plans as compared to its relative balance sheet may expose the company and financial risk. We are also looking at IL&FS Engineering, where Rail Vikas Nigam has terminated the contract for the company for construction of 7 stations in Kolkata. Apart from that, Rail Vikas Nigam has also said that they are going to be encashing in all the bank guarantees which have been provided by the company to the tune of more than 40-odd crore. We're looking at PVR, where the board of directors have approved raising plans to the tune of fundraising plans to the tune of around 750 crore via QIP method. Also, we are tracking in entertainment network out there, where the board has approved the company's foray into US market, which is basically to enter into time brokerage arrangements to broadcast radio programs. Apart from that, we're looking at Vedanta, where 2 developments took place. Let's see, restrain Sterlite from reopening the plant, and Vedanta further has gone ahead and to the petition Apex Court to implement a tribunal order. So that's one long drawn battle that we'll be looking at. Apart from that, Jet, where an ET report suggested that the company is looking to raise around around $150 million in loan and is seeking Etihad backing. Apart from that, ICRA is expected to be in focus again because the promoter entity Singapore has sold in 2.1% stake. In Baldales, we are looking at Healthcare Global Enterprises, where Pabra Investment Fund has sold in more than 2% stake in the counter at a sum of, or for a consideration of, 198 per share.
The GST Council has approved lowering of rates on certain items which were previously taxed at 28% and has brought them down to sub 28% tax slabs. Some of these items include monitors and TVs with screen size up to 32 inches, retreaded tires and lithium-ion batteries used for power banks. All these items have been brought down from 28% to 18%. Cinema tickets costing ₹100 will now be taxed at 12%, and cinema tickets over ₹100 will attract a tax rate of 18% from 28% earlier. Considering the revenue implications, the GST Council did not approve lowering of GST on cement, air conditioners and dishwashers, considering these as dishwashers are still used by a certain category of consumers who can still afford paying a higher rate of tax. Besides this, some of the policy changes that have been approved by the GST Council include a new composition scheme for service providers, and the threshold and the limit for taxpayers who will be able to avail this composition scheme will be decided in consultation with the Law and Fitment Committee. The new return filing system that has already been approved by the GST Council will be implemented on a trial basis from April 1, and the mandatory implementation of the new return filing system will start from July 1, 2019. Besides this, a group of ministers has also been constituted to study the revenue trend of states and analyze the reasons why some of the states are still reporting revenue shortfalls.
After consideration, since it's a new taxation system and the number of registrants has already increased, so the council was of the view that we should now encourage more and more people who have been left outside the system to join the taxation system. और इसलिए 31 मार्च तक जो भरेंगे 2019 तक उनको कोई फी या पेनल्टी एडिशनल नहीं लगेगी. This is only a one-time offer which is being made. So those who are supposed to pay GST and file their returns, but have not done that, should file it by the 31st of March 2019, and all they have to pay is their tax liability, if any. There will be no penalty or any other liability. All the decisions taken today, whether in relation to service tax or in relation to goods, the total revenue impact for the whole year is estimated to be approximately about 5,500 crores. Yeah, for the full fiscal.
India is a priority market for us. We have seen tremendous growth in the game of basketball and in all of our NBA metrics over the last several years. 120 million people tuned in to watch NBA games last year. 3 million Facebook fans on the NBA India page with 1.4 billion impressions. We had 10 million kids participate in junior NBA programs over the last 5 years. And so we're seeing tremendous growth in the sport and in the NBA, and those are some of the reasons that we decided to bring the games here to India.
Most of our players from the current setup here in India come from smaller towns and the tier 2 or tier 3 cities. What sort of plans do you have to promote the game there, and did you have in mind that you could host your preseason games somewhere in a tier 2 town or a tier 3 town, expecting a better response as compared to a metro like Mumbai?
You know, I think from a talent perspective, I think that's been one of the great things in terms of our talent search, which we do with ACG NBA Jump, the program, as well as our Reliance Foundation Junior NBA program. We've kind of democratized how you can actually find a route to be successful in basketball. Our Reliance Foundation Junior NBA program last year was in 34 cities. ACG NBA Jump, which was the kind of selection process for our academy, had entries from over 40 cities or 40 cities and villages across the country. If you look at the first batch of 24 kids, we had kids from Mumbai, we had kids from Ludhiana, we had kids from Kochi, so we had kids from all over the place. And I think that's the great thing about all the activities that we're doing. We're seeing the kind of adoption, whether it's participation, whether it's talent coming from all over.
Mark, I remember speaking to you the last time a couple of years back, and I remember asking you, how would you promote a game like basketball in a cricket-obsessed nation like ours? Now, from the time I last spoke to you, the sporting landscape in India has changed drastically. Now you have the Pro Kabaddi League, now you have the Pro Badminton League, you have a tennis league, you have an ISL. So games like these have got a much wider exposure because of this on national television. Does that deter the NBA in any way? And now how do you plan to take the game forward in India, considering competition is much more than just cricket?
Yeah, no, it doesn't deter us at all. I actually think it's very encouraging, because what that says to me is that the market and the Indian market and the Indian fan and consumer is starting to consume more sports. And they're starting to be more willing and open to say, we love different sports. We want to experience different sports in addition to cricket. Cricket, of course, is so popular here, but the fact that these other sports now can emerge in the Indian landscape is positive for the NBA. And I think that we've seen from the actual metrics of our growth that that's happening. We see the number of fans, the number of people who are consuming the NBA product now and consuming basketball is growing exponentially. And so for us, it's all very, very encouraging.
Yannick, a follow-up to that. Do you think a national level league like the IPL or an ISL is the need of the hour to give a much wider exposure to basketball in a country like India?
You know, I think that raising the level of competition in the sport at various levels, whether it's at the junior level, school level, collegiate level, or the professional level, I think it's important. It's an important part of developing the ecosystem and success in a sport. So, anything that can actually help grow that ecosystem, including raising the level, which could potentially be, better, higher quality of tournaments, professional league, is something that we'd support, because, as we've always said, our primary focus is let's grow the game of basketball. So we know that the Basketball Federation of India, along with their partners, have spoken about doing, more competitions, including potentially a professional league. And it's something that, if we are asked to help and assist with, it's something we will definitely look at, because we think raising the level of competition is an important component of building the basketball ecosystem in India.
Several stories available on the website, and of course all the live market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live. Here are a couple of stories you'll find if you log on at this moment. The government is considering an additional soft loan of 7,400 crore rupees to sugar mills for creating ethanol capacity under a recently launched scheme. That's a PTI report, so watch out for sugar companies today. The Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Board, or ONGC Board, has suggested that it is not the right time to list the firm's overseas investment arm ONGC Videsh on the bourses. And the statutory auditors of IL&FS acted in a negligent and fraudulent manner and prepared incorrect financial statements of the debt-laden conglomerate. That's according to an allegation made by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs on the basis of an interim report filed by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Before we end, on behalf of all of us here at Bloomberg Quint, here's wishing you a very Merry Christmas. Hopefully, the love and peace of your family will find its way into your homes. That's all we have for you on this edition of All You Need to Know. Up next is Indian Open, so do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.